High above the clouds, a private flight cuts through the sky, carrying someone who holds immense power in this world. Down at the airport, the runway is locked down and cleared for an arrival of the highest priority. As the massive aircraft touches down on the tarmac, high-ranking government agents prepare themselves to greet a living legend. The door opens, and the security detail immediately snaps to attention, shouting their respectful welcome. Every agent bows low to the ground, humbled to be in the presence of one of the world's absolute peak authorities, the 12 Saints. Stepping out into the open air, a man with a sharp, commanding presence looks down at his escort. Adjusting his collar against the wind, he carries the unmistakable aura of an elite powerhouse. This is none other than the legendary Sagittarius Saint himself, Hugo Otters. Descending the stairs, Hugo wastes zero time on pleasantries and coldly demands the whereabouts of the president. The agents quickly inform him that the president is waiting at the official residence, and without hesitation, Hugo heads straight for the car. As Hugo strides past, the escort team can barely breathe under his overwhelming pressure. The agents wipe the sweat from their brows, completely terrified and in awe of what real monster-tier power feels like. They murmur among themselves that this is the true presence of a God-chosen ranker. Unbothered by their whispers, Hugo keeps his focus entirely on the urgent meeting ahead. A high-end sedan tears through the city streets at full speed toward the presidential residence. Sitting in the back seat, Hugo remains dead silent, wrapped in dark contemplation. He looks out the window, his mind racing with troubling thoughts. Suddenly, his phone violently buzzes, breaking the silence and making him suspect persistent media leaks. A wave of tension hits his face as he remembers the recent chaotic rumors claiming that Geon is still alive. Looking down at an unknown caller ID, Hugo grinds his teeth in disbelief. How could that man possibly return after 20 whole years? Annoyed by the continuous buzzing, he slams the phone face down against the seat console. The car falls dead silent once again, but the heavy unease in the air remains suffocating. Hugo stares ahead with a cold, hardened expression, trying to suppress the ghosts of his past. A dark, chilling memory surfaces, a cold declaration echoing from 20 years ago that someone was destined to die. It was a desperate plea from Teksu, his face etched with pure terror and urgency. Clenching his hands tightly together, Hugo's past self had gripped every ounce of his resolve. Back then, Geon stood with a fierce grin while tearing into food, completely unfazed by the threat of death. Geon simply laughed off the dire warning, casually mocking the idea of anyone managing to kill him. During the brutal Tower of Demons raid, humanity fought for its very survival against unthinkable horrors. Hugo had been assigned to hold the perimeter outside the tower, fighting off relentless waves of calamities at Geon's request. Covered in wounds and gasping for breath, Hugo could only pray that Geon would make it out of that hellhole alive. When the dust finally settled outside the cave, he desperately demanded to know what happened to his comrade. Standing completely alone in the aftermath, the grim reality slowly set in about the saints who had entered with Geon. The other saints emerged victorious, with sinister smirks on their faces, carrying the massive, severed head of the Crimson Eye. They had completely abandoned Geon to die inside the lair, taking all the glory and the monster's trophy for themselves. With that victory recognized worldwide, the dynamic of global authority shifted forever. The 12 Saints claimed absolute renown, crowned as humanity's ultimate saviors and bathing in supreme power. Lying bandaged and broken in a hospital bed, Hugo groaned under the sheer weight of his sorrow and guilt. He refused to accept Geon's demise, convinced that the strongest human couldn't fall so easily. He repeatedly begged the higher-ups to send a search party back into the tower, but the corrupt elite simply turned a deaf ear. A haughty, condescending voice coldly shattered his hopes, telling Hugo that his friend was already dead. It was none other than the cancer saint himself, Jean-Louis Morin. Looking down on the injured Hugo, Jean-Louis mocked him, claiming that surviving an endless horde of high-tier calamities inside the tower was pure mathematical nonsense. He scoffed and told Hugo that if he was so worried, he should drag his broken body back into the dungeon to search for him alone. With a venomous smirk, Jean-Louis laughed that if Hugo died in there too, it would just leave 11 saints to rule the world. Hugo stared back with burning hatred, knowing full well these traitors had planned Geon's downfall from the start. He grit his teeth until blood nearly spilled, helpless to avenge the only man who had never betrayed him. Snapping back to reality in the moving car, Hugo's eyes narrowed with heavy suspicion. As the vehicle sped toward the capital, the bizarre reports continued, echoing relentlessly in his head. He knew Geon was an unstoppable force of nature, but escaping that apocalyptic grave 20 years later simply seemed impossible. Looking out at the passing cityscape, Hugo sadly realized that even if miracles were real, it was simply far too late. The lingering memory of his legendary friend still cast a heavy shadow over his heart. He could still clearly picture Geon's back, the lone warrior who carried the fate of humanity on his shoulders. The driver suddenly interrupted his thoughts, announcing an urgent incoming call from the Prime Minister. Hugo answered through the monitor, coldly asking what official business required his attention so abruptly. On the screen, a flustered official immediately brought up the breaking news, sending shockwaves across the globe. When the Prime Minister mentioned the sudden collapse of the Tower of Demons, Hugo merely let out an exhausted sigh. Tired of the endless political games and rumors, Hugo braced himself for the inevitable question. Before the Prime Minister could even finish, Hugo bluntly refused to take part in any search mission for the lost hero. With cold finality in his eyes, he declared that Lee Geon had died in that tower 20 years ago, and nothing would change that truth. Hugo bluntly added that the whole commotion at the tower was likely caused by Geon's fanatical followers chasing false hope. He warned the Prime Minister not to use this tragedy for political games, but the official urgently interrupted him. With a trembling voice, the official revealed that an emergency report from the Korean government had just confirmed an incoming call on that specific line. Hugo froze in sheer disbelief, his cool composure shattering in an instant. The Prime Minister clarified that the call didn't come from any follower, but directly through Lee Jeon's private direct hotline. Hugo's heart pounded like a drum as the shocking revelation hit him with immense force. Completely losing his mind, Hugo grabbed the front seat and started violently banging on it, screaming in overwhelming excitement. Terrified by the sudden madness, the driver could barely grip the wheel as Hugo roared at him to stop the car immediately. With panic plastered across his face, the driver desperately agreed and slammed on the brakes. The tires smoked and shrieked violently against the asphalt as the sedan ground to a sudden, dramatic halt. A sudden wave of realization hits Hugo as he rushes to grab his personal phone. He frantically recalls the barrage of unknown calls blowing up his device just moments ago. Staring down at over 30 missed calls, a brand new notification suddenly pops up on the screen. A voice message has arrived. Cold sweat drips down his face as his eyes lock onto the restricted caller ID. With trembling hands and a racing heart, Hugo taps the screen to play the audio file. He raises the phone to his ear, every nerve in his body on edge as heavy static fills the line. A chillingly familiar, menacing voice breaks the silence, coldly calling out his old, real name. Oh Tek Soo. Without a shred of hesitation or doubt, the voice delivers a terrifying, direct promise. He will find him. Behind the threat looms the demonic, bloodthirsty shadow of Lee Geon, declaring that he has returned from the abyss to slaughter him. The message ends with a psychotic laugh and a mocking, "Good luck," leaving the Sagittarius Saint paralyzed in pure, unadulterated terror. That unmistakable cadence and fearless tone, there is no doubt left in Hugo's mind. His breath catches in his throat as he realizes his oldest ally has truly returned from the dead. Bursting with sudden adrenaline, Hugo screams at the driver to turn the vehicle around immediately. When the panicked driver asks about their high-level government meeting, Hugo roars that nothing in England matters anymore. The car executes a wild drift across the highway, speeding full throttle back toward the airport tarmac. Meanwhile, somewhere deep within the bustling district of Incheon, inside a cozy 24-hour restaurant, an entirely different scene unfolds, far away from the global panic. With a dark, playful smirk plastered across his face, the resurrected hero Lee Geon stares down at the screen, chuckling to himself at how bold his old friend has gotten. Geon notes how Hugo finally dared to ignore his direct calls. His companion curiously asks who he was trying to contact, but Geon smoothly brushes it off while curiously examining the modern smartphone in his hands. Holding the sleek black device, Geon stares at the glowing screen in utter fascination. He casually remarks that he entered the Devilish Tower back in 2005, and now that it's 2025, the world feels completely foreign to him. His companion eagerly points out that smartphones can connect to the entire world, allowing anyone to read real-time global news instantly. A sharp spark lights up Geon's eyes as he wonders if the current media is talking about his sudden return. The young hunter enthusiastically taps the screen, explaining that rumors about Geon are already trending everywhere. With a quick flick of a finger, dozens of live articles, heated debates, and breaking headlines fill the display. Both lean in close to inspect the wild media frenzy surrounding Geon's supposed survival theory. However, as the companion scrolls down to the public comment section, the mood takes an extremely awkward turn. The internet trolls are relentlessly bashing Geon, blindly claiming that the Leo Saint killed the Crimson Eye while calling Geon a useless scrub who leached off the 12 Saints. Veins violently bulge across Geon's neck and arms as he crushes the phone into pieces with his bare hands, while the horrified companion screams in despair. Rage explodes inside Geon as he furiously curses the coward Saints who ran away and took all the credit. Grinding his teeth, he forces himself to take a deep breath and regain his composure, knowing full well this kind of deceit was bound to happen. Glancing back down at the screen, another intriguing headline catches his attention. Seeing a report about his supposed final will, Geon remembers the actual instructions he left behind 20 years ago. He had explicitly written that if he perished in the raid, all of his vast fortune should be donated straight to orphanages and scholarship funds. Curious to see if the authorities actually fulfilled his wishes, he taps on the exclusive article to read further. To his absolute shock, the news states that Geon supposedly bequeathed all of his wealth, territory, and sacred relics directly to the 12 Saints, excluding only Sagittarius. Realizing those bastards forged his final wishes to steal everything he built, Geon's blood runs ice cold with murderous intent. Pure, terrifying divine energy flares up as Geon completely pulverizes the phone into dust, vowing to tear every single traitor limb from limb, divine gods included. While the young companion weeps over the tragic death of his poor smartphone, a monstrous disaster is officially preparing to rain vengeance upon the entire world. As the poor guy sobs over the crushed pieces of his device, Geon sits back, pondering his next move. He realizes that even if he announced his return right now, his appearance has drastically changed from 20 years ago. Instead of the crippled, half-dead fighter of the past, he now looks completely revitalized. Nobody would believe he's the real Geon. He decides the best strategy is to stay hidden in the shadows, systematically hunting down the traitorous Saints one by one. While the young man cries about still paying off the phone contract, an ominous red haze suddenly creeps across the floor. A sinister, bloody aura floods into the restaurant, catching Geon's razor-sharp instincts immediately. A glowing blue system alert flashes before his eyes, warning him that someone is actively watching. Geon's gaze turns lethal as he instantly recognizes the distinct, menacing demonic energy outside. Rising from his seat, Geon marches toward the exit while the confused companion shouts to ask where he's heading. With a cold smirk, Geon casually replies that he's just stepping out for some fresh air, ready to butcher whatever lurks outside. Stepping out into the street, Geon instantly feels the burning atmospheric pressure descending upon the area. Swirling out of the open sky, massive, flame-horned beasts materialize right in the middle of the city. Roaring with terrifying intensity, the fiery entities lock their glowing predator eyes straight onto Geon. Geon immediately recognizes these divine minions as the spiritual lackeys serving the Aries Saint. A blue system window pops up, alerting him that the minions are forming a territorial Aries barrier to suppress other divine powers. Another notification rings out, stating that these divine beasts are brazenly demanding human offerings. Letting out an annoyed sigh, Geon glares at the arrogant creatures floating above him. Cracking his knuckles, he curses the Saints for kissing up to divine gods and acting like they own the entire world. A swirling vortex of immense divine energy ignites around Geon's feet as he steps forward. Annoyed by how noisy the world has become about Geon, the disaster-class hero prepares to remind them who truly sits at the top. Looking up at the clear sky in confusion, Geon suddenly pauses as a passing conversation catches his ears. Across the quiet Incheon street, a well-dressed couple strolls past the restaurant, gossiping loudly about the latest media storm. They scoff about the news headlines, talking about how the whole internet is blowing up over some supposed hero. The man takes a drag from his cigarette, arrogantly mocking Geon as nothing more than an ancient, washed-up relic. Clinging tightly to his arm, the woman laughs along in condescending agreement, acting smug and untouchable. A golden badge pinned to their cardigans glints brightly in the sunlight, bearing the distinct crest of a powerful faction. Seeing that symbol, the young companion gasps in sheer dread, realizing these arrogant walkers belong directly to the Gemini constellation. The couple suddenly stops in their tracks, startled by the overwhelming, bone-chilling presence locking onto them. Standing directly in front of them like an immovable predator, Geon blocks their path with pitch-black, murderous aura flaring. From the restaurant doorway, the terrified young companion desperately shouts at Geon to back off and come inside before disaster strikes. A sleazy thug with a cigarette dangling from his mouth glares down, barking at him to get lost and stop staring. While the onlookers panic, thinking a brutal beatdown is imminent, the thug casually blows a cloud of smoke right into the protagonist's face. Leaning in with absolute arrogance, he taunts him, daring him to throw a punch if he's got a problem. His girl laughs, mockingly telling him to let it go before the kid wets his pants. Giving his head a condescending pat, the thug sneers and calls him a chicken as he brushes past, completely oblivious to the monstrous force he just provoked. Stopping in his tracks, the thug turns around with an irritated smirk, demanding to know why the kid is still staring at them. Cloaked in dark, suffocating energy, Geon stands motionless as sheer, murderous intent builds beneath his cold expression. Leaning in close until their foreheads almost touch, the arrogant thug taunts him again, daring him to swing if he is truly angry. Laughing hysterically, the girlfriend tugs on the thug's arm to leave, mocking that the kid looks ready to wet his pants. Turning away with a dismissive chuckle, the thug mutters under his breath, calling him a pathetic coward. Walking away arm in arm, the arrogant couple chuckles, mocking everyone who still worships Geon. The woman laughs in agreement, questioning why people obsess over the weakest so-called saint, causing the final thread of Geon's patience to completely snap. Relieved that a public fight was avoided, the companion praises Geon for holding back against A-rank Gemini rankers, unaware of the terrifying grin forming on Geon's face. Geon suddenly cups his hands around his mouth and roars at the top of his lungs. His deafening shout echoes through the entire street, calling both of the high-ranking elites a pair of filthy cockroaches. Freezing on the spot, the two Gemini hunters slowly turn around with dark, homicidal glares. With divine dark pressure suffocating the street, Geon unapologetically confirms that he was talking directly to them. Cracking his knuckles with a manic, bloodthirsty grin, Geon prepares to crush these pests into the pavement. The true legend has awakened. An absolute disaster is about to descend upon anyone standing in his way. To be continued in the next episode.